I was admitted to St. Harlow Memorial Hospital 3 days after collapsing from a severe lung infection. The place was old, the kind of hospital that smelled like rust and bleach with walls painted in a color that might once have been white, but had aged into something between yellow and gray. The elevators groaned when they moved, and the fluorescent lights flickered like they resented having to stay on. They put me in room 9B, near the end of the East Wing, a quiet stretch where the heating clanged at night and the nurses spoke in whispers. I didn't have visitors often. My family lived 2 towns away, and with my oxygen mask and the wires hooked into my arm, I didn't want anyone seeing me like that anyway. The first few days were uneventful. Antibiotics, breathing treatments, the endless beep of the heart monitor. I began to recognize the faces of the nurses. Bright, brisk people who checked vitals, smiled, and vanished. Except one. She wasn't like the others. I first noticed her the 3rd night, tall, with hair so dark it almost looked blue under the hallway lights. Her name tag read E. Harrow, but I never heard anyone call her by name. She moved quietly, almost too quietly, her shoes making no sound on the tile floor. When she entered my room, the air seemed to cool, as if someone had opened a window. She didn't smile when she saw me awake. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice soft, almost careful. I shook my head. Her eyes were strange, pale gray, and when she looked at me, it felt like she wasn't really seeing me, but something through me. She checked my IV line, her fingers cold, her movements slow and precise. "Try to rest," she murmured. "Night's not good for the weak." I laughed weakly, thinking she was joking, but she didn't laugh back. She just turned. Her figure reflected faintly in the window glass, and for a split second I saw her reflection move a heartbeat slower than her body. When the morning nurse came, I mentioned her. "Tall woman, dark hair, gray eyes?" The nurse frowned. "You mean Evelyn? We don't have anyone by that name here anymore, not since last winter." I thought she meant Evelyn had quit, but as she left the room, I noticed the way she avoided looking down the East Wing hallway, the same way people avoid staring into a dark, open doorway. That night, I tried to stay awake. The lights dimmed around midnight and the hospital grew still. I told myself the silence was normal, but when the clock ticked past 2:30 a.m., I heard it again, the soft, deliberate scrape of shoes in the hallway. Slow steps, getting closer, stopping right outside my door, and then a whisper that froze my blood. "Time for your check." The next night I didn't sleep. I waited. The nurse came again just past 2:30 a.m. The door opened without sound, and her figure appeared in the dim light. That same tall frame, dark hair, and those ghostly gray eyes. "Time for your check," she whispered. I watched as she reached for my IV line. Her touch was freezing. The metal clamp on the drip stand rattled slightly as she adjusted it, though her hands didn't move much. I noticed then that she wasn't wearing an ID lanyard, just the small metal name badge, E. Harrow. She leaned over me to listen to my breathing. Her hair brushed my cheek, dry as paper. "Your pulse slows at night," she murmured, her breath cold on my skin. "But that's all right. The night makes everyone slower." I forced a nervous laugh. "Do you work every night?" Her head tilted slightly, almost like a puppet's. "Every night." Then she stood up so abruptly that the chair beside the bed shifted on its own, as though something invisible had brushed it. "Sleep now," she said. "You'll need your strength when it's time." When morning came, I felt weak, drained, as if I'd been awake for days. My oxygen monitor showed irregular patterns that confused the attending nurse. "Your readings dropped for a while around 3 a.m., she said, checking the machine. "You sure you didn't get up?" I told her about the night nurse, him again. Her smile faded. "We don't run the East Wing at night anymore," she said quietly. "Not since the fire," I blinked. "What fire?" She hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. "It was years ago. A patient room shorted out, electrical fault. 2 patients died and—" A nurse, Evelyn Harrow. The name hit me like a jolt. My chest tightened. She must have seen my expression because she added quickly, "Don't think about it. Old buildings have stories." But that night I couldn't stop thinking about her. I kept the overhead light on, the call button in reach. Around 2:30, the bulb above my bed flickered once, twice, and went out. The room went cold, and in the darkness, I saw her reflection in the window again, standing beside me, though when I turned, there was no one there, only the sound of my heart monitor speeding up, and the faint whisper that crawled through the dark. Breathe slower. It's easier that way. By the fourth night, I was sure something was wrong. Every nurse I asked gave me the same look, that careful, uneasy sympathy reserved for patients who say strange things. She's probably part of your dream, one said. You're on strong medication. They mess with sleep cycles. But I wasn't dreaming. The bruises on my arm where she held me were real. And one morning, I woke to find the IV tape peeled halfway back as if someone had been trying to remove it. I started keeping notes in my phone. So it's 4 a.m., cold air again. 2:36, footsteps. 2:39, a time for your check. I even recorded one night. The next morning I played it for the day nurse. At first it was just silence, then faint static and something that sounded like breathing. Then a soft female voice. Rest now. She froze, staring at the phone. Then she shook her head quickly and left the room without saying a word. Later that afternoon, a doctor came to check on my mental state. He asked if I'd been experiencing hallucinations. I laughed, but my voice cracked. I'm not crazy. She's real. She touches me. She talks to me. He scribbled something on his clipboard and left. I overheard him later in the hallway. Something about sleep paralysis episodes. That night I decided to confront her. I stayed awake again, every muscle tensed. When she appeared, she looked almost surprised to see me watching her. Why me? I asked, my voice trembling. Her head tilted again. Because you're between. Between what? She smiled then, a slow, unnatural curl of her lips. The breathing and the stillness. Before I could respond, the heart monitor shrieked. My chest tightened as though something invisible was pressing down on me. I gasped for air and she just watched. Calm, fascinated. When the lights flicked back on, she was gone. The nurse who rushed in found my oxygen mask on the floor and my pulse erratic. You could have died, she said. I wanted to tell her that maybe I already had, at least for a moment. I started noticing strange details about the East Wing. Most of the patient rooms past mine were empty. Some had no power, their windows sealed with plastic. The staff avoided walking that way, and when I asked why, one nurse whispered, "That part's closed off. Maintenance never fixed the wiring after, well, you know, after what? No one would say." So one afternoon when I could stand, I walked down the hall with my IV pole creaking beside me. The overhead lights flickered dimly. The doors all bore old plaques with numbers that had been scratched out. When I reached the end, I saw a sign half peeled from the wall, Ward E Night Shift Station. The smell hit me next, faint smoke mixed with something metallic. The air grew colder as I peered into the abandoned nurses' station. Old charts were scattered across the counter, some singed at the edges. A melted clock hung crooked on the wall, its hands frozen at 2:37. Something about that time made my stomach twist. A soft hum came from behind me, a woman's voice, humming a slow, tuneless melody. I turned, expecting another nurse, but the hallway was empty. Then I saw movement reflected in a dark window. A shape, white uniform, hair tied back. Watching me, I spun around and she was there, closer than I thought possible. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice low and hollow. "They left us all." Before I could speak, she stepped forward, and for the first time I saw the burns. Faint, blackened patches up her arms, her fingers charred and cracked like brittle wood. Her eyes, those gray, unblinking eyes, met mine, and I felt the weight of years pressing down. Then she vanished, leaving behind a faint scent of smoke and antiseptic. When I staggered back to my room, my IV was dripping blood instead of clear fluid. A week later, I begged one of the younger nurses to tell me the truth. She hesitated, but finally said, "Evelyn Harrow worked here. About 10 years ago, there was a fire in the East Wing and faulty oxygen tanks. She tried to save her patients but didn't make it." "What happened to them?" I asked. She shook her head. "They found her near the window. Burned lungs, no heartbeat. But," she swallowed, her body was still warm when they pulled her out, like she'd been breathing after the flames stopped. That night I dreamed of her, standing in my room holding the melted clock from the wall. 2:37, she whispered. That's when it ended. When I woke up, the clock on my nightstand showed 2:37 exactly. From that night onward, the activity intensified. My machines would malfunction only after midnight. I'd hear voices in the vents, wheezing, rasping. Once I woke to find her standing over the bed of the patient next door, her hand pressed to his chest. When I blinked, she was gone, and minutes later a code alarm blared. He was dead. They said it was heart failure, but I knew it wasn't. Evelyn was collecting. 2 nights before my discharge, something changed. The usual background noise, the hum of lights, the shuffle of staff, stopped completely. Silence, total and heavy. Even the machines paused for a second, their rhythm breaking. Then the temperature dropped. My breath fogged, the door opened. Evelyn entered, not walking this time but gliding. Her movements too smooth, too fluid. The edges of her figure flickered like candlelight. "You shouldn't leave," she said. "You're almost ready." "Ready for what?" "To stay." Her hand reached for my chest, and when I couldn't move. My body locked, lungs burning, heart hammering as her fingers passed through me. I saw flashes, white flames, smoke, the screams of patients she couldn't save. Then her voice again, breaking, desperate. "I tried. They left me." The room went dark. My monitors flatlined. For 30 seconds I was gone. I saw her face, inches from mine, calm and expressionless. Then shock, pain, breath. I gasped as the nurses rushed in, reviving me. But over their shoulders I saw her fade into the corner, smiling faintly. They told me it was a near-death event. Lack of oxygen, hallucinations. But when they handed me my discharge papers, I noticed the nurse's signature at the bottom, E. Harrow. I froze. The doctor said, probably a clerical error. But I took the paper home, frame and all. The handwriting, sharp, precise, elegant, was burned into my mind. That night, as I unpacked, I found something else in my bag, a metal name badge, scratched but legible, E. Harrow. The next morning, I called the hospital to ask about it. The woman on the phone was silent for a long time before saying, "Sir, that name hasn't been in our system since 2014. You must be mistaken." But I wasn't. 2 weeks later, I woke in my own bed around 2:30 a.m. The room was quiet. My oxygen levels had been normal for days, yet I suddenly felt short of breath. Then came the faintest sound and the scrape of shoes on tile out in the hallway. I sat up, my pulse hammering. The doorknob turned, slowly, and there she was, in my bedroom doorway, white uniform glowing faintly in the dark, hair pulled back tight, eyes pale gray. She smiled, that same slow, wrong smile. "Time for your check." The lights flickered, and when they came back on, she was gone. But on my nightstand, where my phone had been charging, lay her badge. Cold to the touch, the metal was scorched black, the name still visible, E. Harrow, and beneath it, written in ash across the wood, "You're between now."